The Feed Bandit Podcast, Episode 10, Landscape Management for Wildlife and Hunting. Howdy, and welcome to the Feed Bandit Podcast, where we have fun talking all things hunting, and in the process, do our best to support small and family-owned businesses in the hunting space. Here are your hosts and resident bandits, Jimmy Byrne and Richard Kinchlow. Hey everybody, welcome back, and thanks so much for joining us on the Feed Bandit Podcast. Jimmy and Richard here. How you doing, sir?
Outstanding, sir. It's raining, so that's a good thing. Very excited.
Well, I think it's about to be raining 40 days and 40 nights here. I hope we don't all flood and wash away. But
yeah, I ain't seen a big boat come by, so I'm a little concerned. I may have missed the trip.
Right. But we like to kind of, if we went hunting, we like to recap what happened, I guess, the weekend before. If people listen to episode 9. We recorded that actually down at Rancho Bandito in the middle of our hunt. Let's see what happened. It rained.
It rained a lot.
Pretty much the entire weekend.
Yep.
Like.
No, it's actually been raining, I think, for about 2.5 weeks so far.
Yes, it's pretty crazy, but that didn't stop us from harvesting some animals.
Absolutely. Yeah, we Jimmy got a nice black buck antelope doe, which is outstanding. We've got quite a few of those running around, and they, like most exotics, the black buck antelope do not have any breeding season. So they basically are pregnant year round. With that being the case, they're dropping fawns all the time. So we need to get after and get at them. And it's kind of funny. The antelope, when you're out driving around, they're herd animals, so they don't hang out in the bush per se. They're out there on the plains. When you're driving around, I feel like we go feed them sometimes, but the second you pull a gun out, they are all over the place. So it was good to get one.
Yeah, for sure. Looking forward to eating that meat.
Definitely.
And then, of course, just a management, I don't know if you call it, I guess, a spike of management buck. On the property. But,
yeah, technically. Yeah. Some people will call it a cull,
right.
But I think it's becoming more of a management decision now. We're really not, and we'll talk about spikes as we get down the road, but, back in the day when I was growing up, spikes were definitely considered a cull, an inferior deer. They were basically saying that the white-tailed deer who has spikes as a youngster will grow up and have nothing but spikes. And I have yet to see that. I've seen one 4.5-year-old deer that I killed, which he's absolutely beautiful, that had spikes. So I consider it more of a management thing, taking the mouth out more than bad genetics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, either way, it was fun. A little muddy, but it was a good time to clean some deer, clean some animals. Always good to get that muscle memory back after a year off.
Absolutely.
After cleaning those, I was kind of sore using muscles I haven't used in a year. That's pretty pathetic, but it's true.
Well, and I'll tell you, we can talk about it more later, but that's why you have good tools. A good sharp knife will cut through all that, and keeping the knife good and sharp is definitely a plus. So.
Oh my God, night and day between that. And,
yep.
So
absolutely.
Beginning of the year, it's so nice.
Oh yeah, no, there's no doubt. And then once you get to pig number 97, it's miserable.
Right.
And that's when you let the new guy clean them.
Right. All right. Well, hopefully we're planning on going back this weekend, so hopefully we have a good recap for y'all next week again. But today we're very excited for the podcast because we're going to learn a lot talking to our special guest. We're honored to have on the show Daniel Cunningham. Thank you for joining us this evening, Dan. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are y'all doing?
Awesome. Excited to have you here.
Absolutely. Excited to have you, sir.
I'm excited to be here for sure, no doubt.
Glad we're finally able to connect. What the people don't see from behind the scenes is we've had some technical difficulties prior to this. We're able to finally figure them out. I just want to get this on record. Let me just say Microsoft needs to get its you-know-what out of its you-know-where, but I guess that's neither here nor there. But let me just give a quick bio for the listeners before we dive in. So Daniel is a horticulturalist with Texas A&M AgriLife's Water University program, where he provides professionals and the public with the most current research-based information on resource-efficient and water-conserving landscape management. Focused on a holistic approach, Daniel specializes in native plants, edible landscaping, rainwater harvesting, and utilizing landscapes as habitat for beneficial wildlife. All cool stuff. So we're really looking forward to speaking with him today about a lot of general things, but landscape management for wildlife and hunting, because that's kind of really impacts everything we do. So how about we just jump right into it? And hey, Dan, let's hear your what I like to call your origin story, if you will, like where who you are, where you came from, why you got into this, all that type of stuff. Take it.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I know that introduction's a mouthful. I appreciate it. Or as my wife says when she introduces me at parties, sometimes people don't know horticulturist, they don't know what the word means, and it's really just plants and stuff. So, and plants is something I've been into, pretty much my whole life. Since I can remember, I think, maybe third, fourth grade, there was a woman that lived a couple houses down from us, and she didn't have a fence in her backyard and was just growing all different types of fruits and vegetables there. And I remember being fascinated with the food that she was growing and kind of pun intended, planted the seed for who I would become as an adult. She would take some of that food inside and cook it for me. And then kind of on the native plant side, I was really kind of blessed to get to know a guy named Benny Simpson, one of the founders of the Native Plant Society of Texas, when I was a Weebelo in Boy Scouts, and just remember him talking about not only native plants and their importance for our urban ecosystems as well as our rural ecosystems, but the benefit that they have with different insects and animals, and really kind of that's something I had always been interested in, but I didn't really know that you could do that for a job. In fact, when I got to know y'all two, that was kind of the last thing on my mind going to Texas Tech. I studied business marketing and economics and kind of bounced around and changed majors. But then ended up in horticulture and kind of, hit the ground running. And it's really been more than a passion, I think, is an obsession. I want to know everything there is about plants, whether that's, like I said, in the landscape or out on wildlands as well.
Yeah, I mean that's we're lucky to have you as a friend and a knowledge base for all that stuff.
Oh yeah,
it's
there's
fascinating.
no doubt. There's no doubt. Anytime somebody, any of our group of friends, even thinks about putting something on the ground, why call Dan? Gotta text Dan. But yeah, ask him, let him know. And Jimmy's right. That is a huge resource. That's nice to have.
Right.
I appreciate it, and likewise with everything hunting or technical or finance. It's good to have a good friend base to pull from for sure.
Absolutely. What can you tell us more, other than what I read in the bio, kind of about what Texas A&M AgriLife's Water University program is?
Yeah, so pretty much every state in the union has kind of a land grant university system. And so, whatever that university is, they have an extension program as part of that. And really, extension's role is just education and outreach. So a lot of times that's centered around the agriculture community. So if that's, growing different crops, but also there's a lot of resources there in terms of, I guess the term would be land resource management, natural resource management. And then there's also kind of horticulture, so more horticulture, agriculture, kind of related, growing vegetables and fruits and that type of stuff as well. But yeah, each state has them, and ours is through. Even though my degrees are from Texas Tech, I'm an Aggie. Anytime payday comes around, so Texas A&M.
Well, hopefully payday's never on a Saturday.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no kidding.
Exactly. We don't have to worry about that too much anymore. But yeah, so
Unfortunately.
Texas A&M is has a part. Texas A&M AgriLife is the land grant program that we have. It's part of the Texas A&M University system, and there's two parts of that. So there's research, who I work for, so they're focused trying to come up with the most current research-based information from a variety of topics, anything having to do with science or agriculture. And then there's the extension part of that. There's sister agencies, and extension is actually focused more on the education and outreach. So bringing that most current research-based information to the public, and they do that through a variety of different programs all over the state of Texas. But if you're listening in Oklahoma, Louisiana, really anywhere in the union, you have an extension office nearby with some great resources there as well.
Is the extension office typically out of just one university? Did you say that? Is it like A&M only in Texas?
Yes, that's right. So it is. In the state of Texas, it's Texas A&M. In Oklahoma, it's Oklahoma State. Louisiana, it's LSU, and that land grant university system was actually something that was put into effect by Abraham Lincoln. So federal funds set aside to do that. So pretty interesting.
Okay. The water university part, does that mean that your research is more focused on water and water conservation and how that relates to plants and stuff? Or is that just, you still research primarily just kind of whatever you want, or how does that work?
Yeah, so kind of interestingly enough, here in the DFW area, really this used to be a rural area back in the day. The Research and Extension Center over off of Coit Road at one time, they said the research that was being done there not only affected every Texan, but every American, with research on corn and wheat and also different grazing systems. And then as kind of urban sprawl continued to grow around the Metroplex, the major focus started being around urban issues and finding solutions to those urban problems. And water is one of those. We live in not only one of the fastest growing areas in the state of Texas, but also the country, with estimated 300 to 400 people a day moving to kind of the broader North Texas area. And we have limited water resources. So we get most of our water here from surface water. And we have to do a better job of conserving that water, not only for our current population, but also just being better stewards for generations to come. And so the Urban Water Program, which is coined Water University, is really focused on that. So not just North Texas, we drive all across the state of Texas. But teaching people how they can conserve water, but also how they can protect water on our watershed. So keeping that water clean, not only on our lakes, but also our creeks and our rivers. So, that's kind of what we do. And we do that with 20 plus horticulture based classes for homeowners. So teach them how they can be more efficient with their natural resources. And then we also do some professional trainings as well. Rainwater harvesting is one of those, efficient irrigation, and then a whole wealth of information on growing food, growing native plants, and that type of stuff.
Awesome. Well, I guess that, aside from oxygen, I guess water is the most important thing we need. So I guess that'll keep you in business for the rest of your life.
Yeah, job security for sure. Yeah. So my undergraduate degree is in environmental horticulture, and just looking at, the growing population and figuring out we need to do a little bit better job. I actually got a minor in natural resource management, and then my master's got to look more into grazing systems in terms of cattle, but also wildlife management. And so, we try and put all that together and just realize that everything's connected.
Right. Well, I mean, along since we're on the topic of water, yeah, just one thing that I've kind of always thought, or have started thinking lately, driving around the area, you see all these beautiful green lawns and whatnot, and since knowing you and the ideas that you've talked about in the past and everything about native plants, having a what people call a Texascape, right? Where you plant native plants, and you kind of rely on the climate, I guess, to take care of your lawn more or less. And correct me if I'm not doing a good job explaining it, but it just amazes me that you can do that and have a beautiful lawn, if you do it right. But we
Sure.
still
So,
have these ugly green grass lawns everywhere.
so kind of the running joke is, in terms of xeriscapes, or sometimes people think of drought tolerant plants or native and adapted plants as just yucca and cacti and landscapes with rocks all throughout, and really that's the main focus. And yeah, we joked that you got to have a cow skull, in this case a deer skull or antelope skull in the landscape. But that's not true. Richard, and you were talking about rain kind of opening it up, and we've had record rainfall for September, and certainly we do have drought. Drought is kind of the norm here in Texas. But in our area, we get about 36, 38 inches of rain on average. Now, some years we only see 18, and other years we can see quite a bit more than that. Um, but there are a lot of native plants that really thrive in that kind of rainfall regime. We're also looking not only for plants that are adapted to our rainfall patterns, but our soil type. And that's something key, whether you're looking at growing plants in your landscape or on your ranch or ranchette. There are a lot of different soil types, clays and loams and sands and different combinations of those. But certain plants just like to thrive in certain types of soils. And then we also want plants that are adapted to our extreme heat. So pretty much anywhere down here in Texas, we're going to see multiple 100+ degree days. And we want plants that are Texas tough that can thrive through those seasons.
Right. Yeah, I told my wife if the next house we go into, if I gotta really take care of the lawn, I said I'm either going to, you know, put down rocks in the entire front yard, or I'm going to do your xeriscape
I say,
idea, and I'm going to
call
have you come
Daniel.
over and help me.
Yeah, I was about to say. Well,
So
it's funny you say that, because talking about calling Daniel, when we moved into our house here in DFW, we had a whole bunch of they're established plants like Japanese boxwood, oleander. We had a lot of rose bushes and things of that nature. And I remember I got with Daniel. This has been 100 years ago now, it feels like, and we basically yanked it all out. And we put in some salvia. We put in a flame anthicanthus, which is a great butterfly, hummingbird attracting bush. Then I planted a butterfly bush for my daughter, which the monarchs were just all over, by the way. And we have absolutely gotten the most enjoyment out of it, because first of all I got to do is trim it back. Okay. It comes back every year. It's had the crap kicked out of it by tons of rain, miserable heat, miserable cold, and it comes back every single year, and I don't have to hassle with it. And it provides for our native Texas critters, such as the monarchs, the hummingbirds, things of that nature. So I owe my love of native Texas plants and landscaping and my knowledge specifically to Daniel, for sure.
that's great to hear, and that's a great point. That the added value it has to wildlife. I mean, a lot of landscapes are really just for our enjoyment, but to see the birds, the butterflies, all the different beneficial pollinators and bees, it really just adds kind of a third or fourth dimension to your landscape that, doing it with kids is just fantastic to see their faces light up for sure. But man, just to make us feel like kids again too. And I don't feel like less of a man to say, when I see just this past weekend, the monarchs in the landscape, I get excited and
Yep.
really giddy. and the role that they play and learning more about, wildlife that's native to our area is really fascinating.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. That one of the things that we're going to do an extensive blog on and a podcast on is getting children involved, children involved with wildlife, and not just at your land or at your lease or at your ranch or your farm or whatever, but for getting them involved here. Giving them a stake in the game and teaching them things like that. I mean, my God, these children. They're playing with their electronics and all that, but I guarantee you none of them know how to plant an acorn. None of them know how to plant a plant and see the fruits of that labor. So that's something we'll talk about more. But he's exactly right. Get them involved, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Just a side question. Maybe you can give a quick tip here. What are good plants, or I don't know, whatever it might be, to help prevent a lot of mosquitoes on your property? Other than pouring out standing water and stuff like that. But is there any plants that might help with that?
Yeah, so we actually, one of my side gigs, I have a monthly article now, bi-monthly for the Dallas Morning News. And so if you want to go, read more into that, you can find that article at dallasnews.com. But just off the top of my head, so there definitely are plants that have botanical oils and chemicals in them that repel insects. One of those native that I was talking about earlier today is American beautyberry. It's a plant that grows in the shade, has berries, and has a chemical structure that actively repels mosquitoes. But like a lot of our plants, lavender and lemongrass and rosemary, lantana is one of those. Any of those, if you want to get those oils out, you actually have to crush the leaf of the plant, or you have to burn that plant in order to really make an impact. So a lot of times, people plant these scented geraniums. They call them citronella, which isn't a true citronella. It's just kind of a nickname, or mosquito plant. Just putting that in your landscape doesn't really do anything to deter mosquitoes. Really, the best way to deter mosquitoes is to, like you said, remove that standing water. But with some of the edible herbs, if I'm going to go, maybe today, since we've had all this rain and I wanted to make some burgers, if I got the grill already going or the smoker going and there's some mosquitoes about, if I threw a little bit of rosemary on there, then it could also, because it's burning and smoking, could release some of those volatile oils as well.
Oh, that's interesting. That's awesome. That's a good tip right there.
Yeah, and honestly, if you were going to the deer stand, or you were out maybe trying to find some turkeys, and you see American beautyberry or lantana, both native plants, you crush it and rub it on yourself. If you have, forgot the mosquito spray, and will it control every single mosquito? Probably not, but it's going to do a lot better than just walking through their bare skin.
Oh yeah, that's better than nothing. I mean, those mosquitoes, they eat me alive. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So next time, definitely I'm turkey hunting. I'm going to be looking for that, no question. Let's go back to water real quick. Something about all this rain we're getting right now. I'm sure there are a lot of people, kicking themselves for maybe being lazy and not doing something back when it was kind of a drought to set up some sort of rain catchment or something like that to take advantage of what's falling out of the sky right now. What's that old saying? The time to fix your roof is when it's sunny, not when it's raining, right?
Sure. And one of my mentors, a guy named Brad Lancaster out of Tucson, always says, in times of rain, plan for drought. In times of drought, plan for rain. And that's exactly, what you want to do. Slow sink and spread the water and capture it in tanks and cisterns. And then you'll have that to use for the drier times.
Well, let's talk about that. Can you give us some ideas of the best ways to do that, to capture that rain and then really store it and keep it so that it doesn't go, get all nasty and then, all that type of stuff? Like, what kind of tips can you throw out about that?
Yeah, sure. So, rainwater harvesting is something that's been happening in Texas for a really long time. Our early pioneers were into that, but it's a practice that has been really prominent all over the world for thousands of years. And because we are blessed with great water systems, a lot of times people just turn on the faucet and they expect water to come out. But in drought, that may or may not be the case. If you have a larger property and you're on a well or you're pulling water from a pond, definitely I think people have more of a respect for water. Um, the first thing in terms of rainwater harvesting is you need to kind of look at what your catchment area is. And the catchment area, really for the most part, first thing we would look at is roofs. So if you have asphalt shingles, metal roof, even, wood roofs, you can harvest rainwater off of that roof. Could be a barn, could be a house, could be a shed. And through Texas A&M, we do have some calculators that will help you look at in terms of the square footage of your roof or your catchment area, and then on average how much rainfall you get. So I said, here in DFW we get about 32, 34 inches of rainfall. And then we need to look at also is when that water is kind of spaced out. If we're getting the majority of our water in the spring and in the fall, maybe a little bit less in the summer, we need to have a cistern or a tank that's large enough in order to hold those spring rains and last us throughout the summer until our tanks start filling up again and we start getting water in the fall. So the distribution of that water is also key. And then the other kind of realist approach is rainwater tanks are kind of expensive. So just the regular poly tanks or the plastic tanks, we can get $1 to $2 a gallon, depending on how big. Of course, the bigger cistern you get, the cheaper that's going to be. And then if you're looking at metal tanks, tanks that are metal on the outside with bladder or straight, stainless steel, we could be looking up, 3, 4, 5, 6, even $7 a gallon. So they can get on up there, but you can use that rainwater for any kind of, resource that you would use water, whether that's in the landscape, perhaps it's providing water for wildlife, which we have some resources through AgriLife as well. Different setups where you're kind of making your own catchment area. Maybe it's a smaller barrel to provide water in a certain area. Maybe it could be cattle, but it also could be deer or turkey, quail, what have you.
Awesome. How do you keep that water from getting nasty? You know what I mean? Like if you want to keep it several months, right? So
Sure. So one of the things that we do is you just got to think about that the water that is coming out of your barrel is only going to be as clean as the water going into your barrel or your tank. So you need to look at your gutters. If you have trees around, make sure that those gutters are clean and free of debris. Not only just you don't want all those leaves in your tank, but also you wouldn't want your gutters to breed mosquitoes. And then there are a couple different ways that we do that. So one of those is called the first flush. And you can kind of just Google that term, but first flush is basically it is a section of pipe that is going to catch the first few millimeters of rainwater, raindrops that hit your roof. So maybe a bird, took some relief on your roof. Maybe it's the squirrels do what they do, pun intended.
right.
And you don't want that certainly in your tank. And so it's basically just flushing that leaf debris, perhaps the wildlife poo, into a separate little pipe, and then all the clean water that's running now after that first little bit of rain goes into your cistern. We also typically like to put a basket or a strainer on there as well, so that will catch any debris that happens to make it past those first two. And then when we're getting the water out of the tank, there are different mechanisms. One of those that we recommend is called a floating inlet. And basically what that does is when you open the faucet and you're trying to use that water, it's taking the water from the middle of the tank. So sometimes debris floats to the surface, sometimes debris settles at the bottom. But typically, if we take from the middle of that column, that's where our cleanest water is. And then, we really only want to use that water from that stage. It's going to look clean. It's going to smell great. It doesn't have an expiration date. But we just want to use that around plants, perhaps for our pets and our wildlife. We don't, as humans, want to consume it. It's clean, but it's not that clean. If we do want to clean it to flush the toilets or do drinking water like y'all are doing at Rancho Bandito, it's better to hook that up to filtration in order to clean that water even further.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say we've got at Rancho Bandito, the place that we hunt. We've got that system in place with the filters, and then also we have the UV light. The UV light, I'm hearing, is really kind of the creme de creme of killing all the microorganisms and stuff like that. That'll have you seeing cross-eyed pretty quick.
That's exactly right. And the older systems used to use chlorine, and chlorine's great for some instances, but really benefit for our plants certainly is to have that chlorine not be put in there in the first place, and that's where UV filtration works so well.
Very interesting. All right. So now that we've, collected all this water and we're ready to maybe use it for wildlife and and plants and whatnot, why don't we start talking about plants for wildlife? What could we plant and then use this water we've collected to help grow that plant, specifically, to have some browse or food or whatnot for wildlife to eat. Maybe we talk about, I know it's a pretty broad question, I'm sure, because it depends on the wildlife, right? But, I don't know, start with, like white-tailed deer as an example, now we're in Texas, obviously, so I guess it'd probably depend on where you are as well, because some things don't grow everywhere. But I don't know. Just can you take a shot at that and just give some ideas on that?
Sure. So, like any management practice, you want to focus on what you're actually trying to manage. And for white-tailed deer who are browsers, and, certainly if you have cattle, those are grazers, and you may have some intermediate feeders there as well. But different types of forbs, you'd want to have. And of course, we like natives first, strictly because typically natives are going to be better adapted to not only the rainfall, but also the hot temperatures, the soil, the different pests and diseases that we may see. And, specifically, there's a lot of different native seed companies that have mixes that are really regionally adapted, that do have higher numbers of forbs and wildflowers. A lot of times also, typically if you're trying to restore an ecosystem like our Blackland Prairie, where there's a lot of diverse native plants, you want to incorporate some of our native range grasses as well. Most of those are clumping grasses, so it could be smaller grasses like our buffalo grass, but also curly mesquite and blue grama, and getting into some of our little blue stems, and those help our forbs grow. But because they're clumping grasses, they kind of help create these little pockets where our forbs can grow. And there are quite a few different forbs that we have, specifically that whitetail would like. Partridge pea is one of those. There's a lot of others. I'm kind of blanking right now. But the good thing is depending on where you are, whether it's in the state of Texas or it's perhaps in a different state, is your extension office is going to have a resource of specific plants to your area for the specific game that you want to provide food for. And I would just kind of look at those lists, but also look at the season. So you may be trying to plant something a little bit different in the spring than you would the fall. A lot of times, fall is better time to plant our forbs. Spring and the summer, you can get by with planting some of those native grasses.
Okay. Yeah. So that's good advice there. Reach out to your extension. I mean, there you go. That's you explained all that at the beginning, and there's a perfect use for it, right? So let me ask you. You know, I reach out, I get an idea of what seeds to plant and whatnot, and I find a company that makes a good mix, say, of these seeds, and I get a bag. Uh, can I just go out and just throw them out, or do I need to prepare the land first, or what's the best way to get those things to grow for me, or at least give them the highest percentage of actually growing for me?
Yeah, well, one of the first things you want to look at is kind of what you have there first. So,
Okay.
you can certainly you reach out to me on social media at TX Plant Guy if you need help identifying something. Work with your local biologist through Texas Parks and Wildlife or your local game and fishery and game people. But identify what you have, and you may have actually some really good stuff there. And so, in that case, you may not want to do a lot of soil disturbance. Typically, when we start to till and disturb the soil, while that can kind of give us a clean slate, and it may be necessary if we had some of those invasive plants that didn't have a lot of wildlife value or grazing value. Um, Disturbing the soil is going to release some nitrogen. It's also going to break up the soil structure and those beneficial microorganisms we want in the soil. We don't want to disturb them too much. So, kind of just doing an inventory of what you have. You may have some good stuff. You may have some stuff that's less desirable, and then decide. Do you want to do kind of a mild till? Do you want to do a little bit deeper till? Do you just want to go in there with a seed drill and put that seed out there? But really, I guess the best advice is to do some homework before you do that, and then to make sure that you're not doing more damage than good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just so take inventory, take stock of what's there, and then you got to customize your plan based on basically what's there.
Yeah, and if it was an area that was overgrazed, whether that's from wild-tailed deer or cattle or whoever owned your property before, may have decades of overgrazing. You may have some plants that we call increasers, these plants that don't have a lot of forage value, and so you may try and do a better job of managing your population. So your animals aren't eating the ice cream plants, or typically, that's what happens is animals will eat the ones that they think are most delicious first, and so then the less desirables kind of take a foothold. But then you could go in there and just broadcast seed. It's always better, though, when you're planting seed to do it before a rainfall event, especially if, irrigation is probably, if you're doing something like a food plot, yes, you may have a small area access to irrigation. But if you're trying to do acres, you're probably depending on rainfall for that seed to come up. And so to kind of time it when you do have a rainfall event, typically that's going to be in the spring and the fall here in our area.
Okay.
Danny, I got one thing for you. Again, going back to habitat restoration, talking about getting the kids involved when it comes to this sort of thing. And one of the things that literally every hunter in every state who's got a place can potentially do is planting acorns. That's something that I grew up doing. We had a hunting lease in Throckmorton, Texas, where they didn't have any acorn. They didn't have any oak trees. And I remember literally filling up 2 or 3 swimming pools, little baby pools full of them in the fall of my little Huffy bike, and taking them out there to Throckmorton. They just absolutely loved them, which is kind of funny because they never had exposure to them, but they ate them anyway. But One of the things we do now with our girls is when we go on rides in the neighborhood, we will look for, unfortunately, they're red oaks, and you can maybe talk to that too. Red oak, live oak, and of course, I'm dying to find the chinkapin and the bur oak. But we take those out there and we just randomly plant them. The other thing that we do is, and it kind of got to thinking about is that, I'll go put them under a deer feeder. Okay. And then when the squirrels come, inevitably they're going to bury some of them. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a good way of doing it? Help letting nature help you?
Oh, I think that's fantastic. Not only just for the value, the benefit that it has to the environment, but also just getting the kids involved and doing activity that's fun. Certainly, it's going to take an acorn a long time to grow. And so if you wanted something a little bit quicker, you could do some transplanting of the seeds, or trees, more mature trees. But that's really not practical, both because of the cost and then also transplanting trees. Sometimes the taproot of those trees is a little truncated if it's been in the container too long. Then you're more concerned with irrigation. So really acorns is just more of a numbers game. But yeah, a lot of people can plant a lot of acorns, and then as those acorns begin to germinate, the taproot can kind of dig down in there, can spread its roots, and then you may not have a high percentage turn into mature trees, 10, 20 years later, but certainly some of them will. And I think that technique has been used all over the world for reforestation, and I would say keep up the good work, and I'd actually like to get in on some of that action myself.
Well, God, I'm glad you said that because they're falling, and you're anytime you're more than welcome to come down. But in all seriousness, it is an absolute ball, to be able to take the acorns from here in Dallas and go plant them at Bandito is a whole lot of fun. Danny,
did you ever see any of those come up at out in Druckmann?
Well, so I've been doing it for so long that I just literally I'm like an overgrown 300-pound squirrel, but I can't remember where I planted them, so I have no clue.
One of my favorite.
I wonder what it looks like now. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's funny because if I see a random oak, I'm like, hot dog, there's one of them. But one of the things that I did learn from Dan, one of the many things I should say, is to plant those acorns kind of in areas where they kind of have a natural backstop, meaning I don't want to plant an acorn on the downslope of a hill because the water's going to rush right over there unless we have a good 20-inch soaker like what we're having right now, which hadn't happened in probably a century. So what I've been doing is I plant them at the bottom of the hill, kind of per se. Is that accurate there, Dan?
Sure. So yeah, looking where the water goes, anytime it's a rainfall event, there's those areas that naturally the water ends up and those stay wet a little longer. And sometimes for those little seeds, that's all it takes. If an area is going to not dry out for a week or so, so it has that adequate soil moisture. You can also do some of that kind of yourself. There are different earthen dams that you can, make with a little shovel or even your shoe or foot, but just trying to slow down the water a little bit. There's some different water harvesting earthworks that they're like little eyebrows where the eyebrow is on the downslope. And so as those water drops are kind of moving, they slow kind of at the front part of that dam. And if you put some seeds there and it stays wet, yeah, certainly they'll germinate.
We actually did. God, I'm just coming back to me now. We actually did that, Daniel, with some rocks. I remember that. And you were saying exactly that these rocks will help slow up that water if we get a tank filler, as we call it, and it'll help it soak in. That's crazy. I actually remember where we did those, and I don't think I've seen a tree there yet. So, but only next time.
Yeah, that's funny. And then, yeah, behind those rocks, the soils will kind of deposit in the gaps of the rocks and kind of levels out that area.
How else, other than, where to put the acorn geographically, how deep do you put it? Do you put it at a certain angle when you do that?
Yeah, so the good rule of thumb for planting any seed is to plant that seed about 2 to 3 times the diameter of the seed. So if an acorn was half an inch, if you planted that about an inch and a half deep, that would be perfect. If you plant anything too deep, it really inside of any seed, there's carbohydrates and sugars, and it's that stored energy that the plant uses in order to put the main taproot down, and then those first leaves. And then it's not until it puts out its true leaves until it starts photosynthesizing. So you wouldn't want it to use up that store of energy, before it can get there to the top of the soil. On the other hand, if you're planting something too shallow, certainly some of those may germinate, but they're more easily predated, by now it could be wildlife birds, but maybe some critters, beavers or squirrels or something that you may not want them to eat. So 2 to 3 times the diameter of the seed is the best rule of thumb.
Okay, great. You mentioned something a little while back about people sending you pictures for identification. So you're okay with if people just send you a message on your Instagram or whatever with a picture of the plant they're trying to identify at
Sure.
TX Plant Guy?
Yeah, so Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, if you type in TX Plant Guy into Google, LinkedIn, I'll pop up. Now, people can send me a message if they're shy, and I'll get back to them for sure. If you tag me in the post or put it on my page, it's a little bit more beneficial because then the rest of us get to see and identify it as well. So it's more of a learning tool when it's public, but hey, I spend every day I'm identifying plants. I used to be on the Texas Tech Plant ID team. I was that nerd in college. But really, that's one of the most fun games to play. And actually, if I can get stumped, I really even like that more because that means I get to search and learn. And certainly, if I can't figure it out, then we'll find somebody who can.
All right. Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, I think we'll probably try to wrap it up right there. Is there anything else you guys want to add, Richard or Daniel, before?
No, I just, Dan, thank you so much for your time. You're a wealth of knowledge. And I sincerely hope that especially all the native Texans out there, but everybody else, listens to what you say and really latches onto your message and starts following it because, it's definitely the right thing to do. People, I think more often than not, people go get in their truck in the morning and they take off and they don't even look at their landscape. They look at their landscape when there's a problem, and looking at your landscape around your house and then around your property and your lease and whatnot can just be, quite frankly, I think it can be a huge stress relief, and so I think the world has a lot to learn from you, my friend, and we appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate it as well. I did want to just, as we're wrapping up here, I've kind of set aside some resources that you should be able to find with the show notes that talk about different programs through AgriLife in the state that are free to find more information, whether that's wildlife food plots for whitetail deer, different wildflower wildlife planting guides, more information about habitat restoration and where to find seeds. As well as some resources that help with different problems around plants that you may be finding on your property. So, and then as always, yeah, please feel free to reach out to me at TX Plant Guy, and I'd love to help any way I can.
Awesome, great. Yeah, that was a that was a lot of amazing education, if I might say so myself. I'll have to listen to this episode a couple more times to take it all in. So I really appreciate it, Dan. But would you be okay with coming back and talking to us in the future about some more topics along this
Oh
line?
man, anytime. I'd love to.
Awesome. Would you mind reminding people how they can reach you again and follow you?
Yeah, so at TX Plant Guy is my social media, and then if people want to email me, my professional email is daniel.cunningham at TAMU, like Texas A&M University, TAMU.edu. So once again, that's daniel.cunningham at TAMU.edu.
Awesome. Very good. Well, we will post several links to the great articles that Daniel mentioned earlier than what we've discussed today, definitely on the show notes page. You can find those at feedbandit.com/10. So be sure to go and check out the additional information there. Again, that'll be at feedbandit.com/10. That's the number of the episodes. So thanks again, Daniel. We'd love to have you back in the future, talk more about this fascinating and important topic. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Hope you had a good time listening and learned a lot. And have a good one. Thanks for listening to the Feed Bandit podcast. If you want to find new and innovative hunting gear and service providers not typically offered through the traditional big box hunting stores, come on over and join the hunt at feedbandit.com/join. When you join, as a bonus, you'll get our entertaining free e-guide of unique hunting tips and tricks. And a reminder to all you small businesses, feed stores, gear inventors, or entrepreneurs in the hunting space, if you'd like to get more exposure to potential customers by being featured on the Feed Bandit podcast, please let us know. We'd love to discuss what we can do for you and your business. Go to feedbandit.com/promote. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give us a rating and review on iTunes, as it would really help us out. Go to feedbandit.com/iTunes. Thanks everyone for listening. Until next time, please remember to support your local feed store.